Dana White's Contender Series. This is Season 7, Episode 2. We have 5 fights lined up for Tuesday night. I'm John Kelly. Let's hear the picks. And we're going to get things started in the bantamweight division as Cameron Smotherman comes in as a minus 180 favorite currently. The comeback on Hampus Gregorio is plus 150. And this is a matchup that I have a big bet on the underdog here in Gregorio. And I'll get into a couple reasons why, but we'll start on the Smotherman side. He's an 8-3 prospect fighting out of Texas. Most of his wins have come by knockout, but I have some pretty big concerns with him moving forward. For starters, I don't think he's UFC level. I don't think he's ready for the big show, and I think that'll come to light on Tuesday night. Smotherman is a decent striker. He takes a little bit to get his read, so he starts slow, but eventually he starts to pour it on and break his opponents in later fights. He's basically only just a power puncher. He's very stiff, very heavy on his lead leg, doesn't ever check the leg kicks, struggles in terms of the defensive grappling. He can be held up against the fence for extended periods. He can be taken down, and once he's taken down initially, he can pop back up to his feet pretty quickly, but once you make him continuously work and continuously fend off those takedowns and force him to grapple, he really starts to struggle, and you'll see eventually those get-ups don't come as often, and he could be stuck on his back. This is a guy that only wants to fight in the striking. He's even been very clear in interviews how he hates going to the ground. He hates when people force him to grapple, and it's just because it's not his world, and that's very, very clear. He hasn't really faced anybody worth anything on the regional scene, fought his entire career over in Fury FC, but basically anybody that's looked to grapple has had at least spurts of success against him. And then on the flip side, Hampus Gregorio, I think, is a very well-rounded prospect. He's the former Combat FC featherweight champion. He moved up a weight class for that fight, ended up finishing the guy due to leg kicks, and that's one of his better weapons. He's very constant with the leg kicks, and he will throw a ton of power in them as well, but he's super well-rounded. You know, you see it in his hands. He's got powerful hooks. He's willing to bite down on the mouthpiece and go to war. But what I'm most intrigued by is he has a little bit of a grappling game as well. He trains at Longo and Weidman's MMA with guys like Dennis Bazoukian and these other fighters who are capable of mixing in the wrestling, and we've seen that on the regional scene at times. You know, he's not a super aggressive grappler, but he can get the takedowns when he needs to. He's just a very well-rounded guy. I think skill for skill, he's the better fighter than Cameron Smotherman. Despite the hype, I think you're getting the better fighter at an underdog price, and I think he gets the job done here. And if he really forces that grappling like I expect him to, I think he can break Smotherman down the stretch. So we're going Gregorio by TKO. That's the official pick, and he's going to kick things off for the DGen parlay. And next fight up in the women's strawweight division, we have Eduarda Moura, a minus 165 favorite, with Janine Silva on the comeback at plus 135. And this is a matchup that I'm honestly not going to spend a ton of time on because, for starters, we have very little information to go off of. You're basically going to find no tape on either of these fighters, very, very little available footage, and both of them have not been fighting long professionally, a year, 18 months, whatever. I think Mara is sort of getting the showcase treatment here, though. I do think she's the prospect that they kind of want to give a little bit of shine to. She's 8-0, undefeated Brazilian. 7 of her 8 wins have come inside the distance. She's more of a grappler, and she holds a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She competes in a lot of grappling tournaments as well, but she's only fought outside of the first round twice in her career. And again, these type of fighters that we just don't know enough about, having to bank on them to have 15-minute cardio, like it could just get really ugly. So don't put a ton of confidence behind that. And then on the flip side, Silva is much of the same. She fights out of Brazil, very little experience. She did have one LFA fight, which she looked okay and got the win. Just a power puncher for the most part, doesn't really have much skills to her game. You know, she's just like bulky and has a big overhand right. I don't think she's very good, to be honest with you. I have concerns with the defensive grappling. I think Moura can threaten if she gets the fight where she needs it on the mat. So that's going to be the official pick, is Moura by submission. But again, very little information to go off of. Don't put a ton of stock into it. I'm leaning with the favorite favorite here in Mora, and she's going to be the second pick for the DGen parlay. Which brings us to our next fight in the featherweight division, as Haider Emil comes in as a small favorite at -210. The comeback on Emre Sonmez is +170, and this is a really fun matchup. We'll start on the Haider Emil side. He's a 7-0 undefeated prospect, previously fought over an LFA. 4 of his 7 wins have come by knockout, but he's not really a big one-punch power type of guy. It's typically just from breaking his opponents. He basically just wants to move forward and brawl. That is his fighting style. He fights out of the southpaw stance, switches stances, moving forward, has some powerful hooks, but he does get sloppy when he's closing distance, and he does hold a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he doesn't really look to grapple, but he ends up grappling in a lot of his fights, but most of them don't come from conventional takedowns. You know, he's either catching a kick, knocking somebody down, having a weird exchange where they just end up grappling, and typically he's coming out on top in a lot of those positions just because he's willing to push through that tiredness. You see multiple times where he's getting tired because he pushes that nonstop zombie move forward style of pace where everybody just gets tired, but the difference is he's able to work through when he doesn't have much cardio, and that's how he's been able to break a lot of these opponents. The one concern outside of him just being sloppy at times and fighting that brawling style, the other concern is multiple times in those grappling exchanges, he gives up his back just about every single time when he's trying to work back to his feet. He's been nearly submitted multiple times on the regional scene, so that is one concern, especially since you're facing a guy who is going to look to grapple in Sonmez here. He's 14-4. He's a Turkish fighter fighting out of England, and his primary skill set is his wrestling. You know, he's a decent striker as well, but I expect Emil to be pushing forward, landing the bigger shots. Sonmez is going to go to the grappling. There's no doubt about it. He shoots aggressively in just about all of his fights. He's very relentless with those takedowns, and he secures top position in a lot of those fights. He's not the cleanest grappler, but he is a purple belt as well, along with Emil. I actually think he's the more positionally sound grappler, so if he's able to land takedowns here, I wouldn't be surprised to see Emil give up his back, and that's one thing that Sonmez is very good at, is taking the back, getting the hooks in, securing that position, and he could potentially threaten with a submission as well. So I think this line is a little bit wide. I think Sonmez is a live dog here. We're actually going to go with him to get his hand raised. We're going Sonmez by decision as the official pick, and he's going to be the third pick in the DGen parlay. And next fight up in the light heavyweight division, we have Ibo Aslan, a -158 favorite with the comeback on Paulo Hanato Jr. at +128. And we'll start on the Aslan side. He's an Austrian fighter. He's 11-1. All 11 wins have come by knockout, but this dude has basically the most padded record that I've seen yet this season, and maybe in Contender Series history, which is saying something, because basically all of his wins came against these NPCs. You know, it's a bunch of guys, 40-year-old dudes that have been knocked out 12 times in their career. That's literally like his entire career. He's had one win over a fighter with a winning record, and that's the only guy outside of Turkali that's taken him outside of the first round. He ended up knocking him out in the third, and that guy was no good either. It's just the fact that he had like a 4-0 record when they fought. Nobody else has had a winning record outside of Anton Turkali, who beat him, and he was having success with the leg kicks against Turkali, and I bring that up because that's basically the only real skill set that this guy has in Aslan. Is he's big, he's very powerful, but he doesn't really have much of a skill set outside of his very, very powerful leg kicks. He's hurt multiple opponents with that, Turkali being one of them, dropped him a couple times in that fight. But outside of the power, there's some big fraudulent vibes I get from him. Not just the padded record, but he seems to be a gas can as well in those fights that were extended. The cardio doesn't seem to hold up. We saw that in the Turkali fight. And again, the defensive grappling being another big issue, where Turkali, as soon as he was able to take him down, took the back, and he basically just gave up and tapped to a rear naked choke there. So I have concerns with the cardio. I have concerns that he's never really faced any real competition outside of Turkali, and I have concerns with the defensive grappling as well. He's a big knockout or bust type of fighter, but he's going against somebody in Hanato Jr. who's not the most skilled, but he has two things that I think could be an issue for Aslan. One being he's never been knocked out in his entire career, so he's very durable, and he's also fought to a decision multiple times. So we know he has the cardio to go 15 minutes. He fought on last season of Contender Series against Jamal Pogues, and he lost a competitive decision there. But Hanato Jr., if he can just survive that early storm, not get his legs beat up, I think he's certainly live to take over here. He's very constant with the leg kicks as well. He's a decent striker, very fundamentally sound, and I think he has the better gas tank. So if this fight makes it outside of that first round, I'm going to lean with the dog in Hanato Jr. I think he's more experienced at this level, and I think he could expose Aslan here. Which brings us to our main event in the lightweight division, as George Hardwick comes in as a minus 340 favorite. The comeback on Abdul Kareem AlSawadi is plus 265, and this is a really fun matchup. We'll start on the Hardwick side. He's the former Cage Warriors lightweight champion. He's a 12-1 prospect fighting out of England. Most of his wins have come by finish. He's very well-rounded. This is a solid fighter, good wherever the fight goes, pretty much. He's primarily a striker, very active with the Muay Thai kicks. His kicks are his best weapon. He uses that teep kick and really digs it into the body, and this is a guy that works the body very well, not just with the kicks, but he punishes the body with his hands as well. He's got good boxing, and we've seen when people try to take him down because they don't want to stand with him, he's got good takedown defense, and he's also a decent grappler as well. He's got a very tight guillotine choke, that high elbow guillotine, one of his favorite weapons when people try to go to the ground with him, and he's finished 3 opponents with that as well. So he's just a very well-rounded fighter, works the body well, takes a little bit to get going, but eventually that body work pays off, and he's finishing these guys a lot later in fights. And he's also got a couple quality wins, been tested over 15 minutes multiple times. So this is a guy that kind of checks all the boxes, but I do think there's at least an argument that the line is wide here against a guy in AlSawadi who's very explosive, very powerful. He trains out of Fortis MMA. He's the former Fury FC lightweight champion. He's very explosive. He's got 8 knockout victories, and you see that in his fights. When he lands on dudes, they typically go to sleep, but he's also a pretty well-rounded guy himself. We've seen him go to takedowns in the past. He holds a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we know he's getting good rounds in with guys at Fortis MMA, so he's just a very well-rounded guy. The reason why he's such a big dog is the durability. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career. All 3 of them came inside the first round, and to be honest with you, all 3 of them were pretty brutal knockout losses. So I'm not sure that you can trust the chin here, and I think on the feet, Hardwick's really going to be punishing the body, and eventually I think Hardwick does get the finish. So we're going Hardwick by TKO in the main event. He's going to round things out in the D-Gen parlay. So a quick recap for the D-Gen parlay. In the first fight, we're going with my guy Hampus Gregorio. I don't think he should be the underdog here. I think he's the overall better fighter, and he's going to mix in the martial arts where Smotherman struggles. We're going with the dog in the first fight of the night. In the second fight of the night, not a lot of data to go off. I'll mention that again. I'm going to side with the favorite here in Mora, who I think is the better grappler. I think she gets her hand raised. In the third fight, we're going with another dog in Sonmez. I think the wrestling could be key here. I think Emil, you can't really trust his fighting style. Very sloppy, much of a brawler. I think Sonmez is more fundamentally sound, and I think that'll be the difference here in what should be a competitive fight. In the fourth fight, kind of just banking on Aslan kind of being a fraud. You know, I don't trust him outside of the first round. I think he could be exposed in the grappling, in the cardio as well. We're going with the more experienced guy who was on Contender Series last season in Hanato Jr. Another dog shot there. And then in the main event, should be a really fun fight. I like both these guys. I think they're both skilled, but I think that body work of Hardwick is really going to be key here, and I think he tests the chin of AlSawadi. So Hardwick's going to round things out. So 5 fights on Tuesday, guys. We're going with 3 underdogs. Should be a really fun card. As always, appreciate the support. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.